ourselves to order. Um, First up is approval of our agenda. Sounds like we don't actually have to modify that. So as presented, anybody else have changes you need to suggest? All right, hearing none, we'll consider our agenda approved by consensus and move on to approval of our minutes from August 5th. This we will take a motion, second, and vote on whenever someone's ready to present that from anyone who was at that meeting.
This is Todd. I'll make the motion to accept the approval of the agenda or approval of last month's meeting.
Okay, we have a motion from Todd for approval of those minutes. Do we have a second?
This is Monica. I second the motion.
Thank you, Monica. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and proceed with a vote on approval of the minutes as presented.
Okay, we'll start with Asada Brown.
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg.
Aye.
Cecily Harris.
Aye. And again, it took me 15 minutes to get on today.
Todd Kemery.
Todd says aye.
Bob Moeller. Looks like Bob's still dealing with technical difficulties. Jeremy Peichel.
I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Anthony Taylor is not on yet, I don't believe. Canna Yang.
Aye.
And Tony Russo.
Aye.
All right, I see Bob's got a phone up to 0. I'm not sure if he's logged on to our meeting yet. Doesn't look like it. But we do have the minutes are approved.
All right, thank you, everybody. So minutes are approved as presented. That brings us to public invitation portion of our meeting. As you remember, mentioned last time that we had both the possibility to submit by email and the ability to pre-register. I don't think I've heard of anything. Staff, have we received anything there?
Tony, we have not received any. I just checked the public info line, so thank you.
Okay, perfect. That brings us on then to our first business item, which will be the Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail Master Plan for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. And we have Colin Kelly to present. Go ahead, Colin.
Good afternoon, Chair Russo, council member, and commissioners. Actually, I don't believe our council member is here, so strike that from the record. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I am Colin Kelly, as was stated, Regional Parks Planning Analyst, and I'm here to present the Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail Master Plan on behalf of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, or MPRB for short. I should note that Adam Arvidsson and Madeline Hudek of MPRB are both here today and may respond to questions after this presentation as needed. Next slide, please. Minnehaha Parkway is located in the center of the regional park system in Hennepin County and the city of Minneapolis. These are figures 1 and 2 in the staff report. Minnehaha Parkway is part of the Grand Rounds Scenic Byway and directly connects Minneapolis Chain of Lakes Regional Park to Nokomis, Hiawatha, and Minnehaha Regional Parks. Next slide, please. For planning purposes, the regional trail was broken down into 4 segments based on geography and the distinctive qualities of each section, with segment 1 to the west and segment 4 to the east. This is figure 3 in the staff report. Because the segment of Minnehaha Parkway that is immediately north of Lake Nokomis was studied during the Nokomis-Hiawatha Regional Park planning process in 2015, it is not included in this plan. I'll be going through each of these segments and their respective focus areas in a few minutes. Next slide, please. The overall engagement goal for the project was to be collaborative with as many stakeholder groups as possible. This means the design team and MPRB staff worked directly with stakeholders throughout the process to ensure that perspectives were consistently understood, considered, and reflected in project decisions. The planning process included many different ways of gathering community input, including open houses, community events, web surveys, and creek tours with youth. Common themes that emerged from early engagement activities included trail quality, roadways, natural resources, and programs and facilities. Some of the specific feedback included separate trails for bikes and pedestrians, concern around invasive species along the creek, and improved path lighting throughout the trail corridor. A Community Advisory Committee, or CAC, made up of 19 community members provided guidance and support for the plan as well. CAC members were intended to represent a mix of viewpoints that includes residents, park users, stakeholder groups, and others. A 45-day public comment period began in June of last year and wrapped up in August. After that, a public hearing was conducted and the final plan was presented to the MPRB Board of Commissioners for approval in November. Next slide, please. The Regional Trail Corridor was created through a joint effort between MPRB, Minnehaha Creek Waterside District, or MCWD, and relevant departments at the City of Minneapolis. Projects involving county roadways or transit service will require coordination with Hennepin County, Metro Transit, adjacent municipalities, and the Metropolitan Council. In order to be most efficient and effective within the Regional Trail Corridor and Parkway, MPRB, MCWD, and the City of Minneapolis established a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, in 2017. The MOU outlines how the agencies will work together to enhance the ecological and recreational opportunities of the creek corridor, reduce flooding, achieve regional pollutant load reductions, and other goals. Next slide, please. With regard to Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail, the most underserved users are likely those that are not frequent users or nearby residents. Through the Mapping Prejudice project, we know that the areas surrounding Minnehaha Creek had some of the highest levels of racial covenants when compared to other parts of the city. Contrasting demographics and diversity in other areas of the city, like in the Powderhorn and Phillips neighborhoods, reflect how these covenants have influenced generations of potential inequities over time. Just outside of the 2-mile service area, the plan noted that there are more residents who report disabilities, and that those individuals tend to rely more on public transportation and non-motorized modes for transportation and recreation. Of the primary stakeholder groups identified, youth in other parts of the city and non-motorized trail users could be categorized as underserved. The main method for engaging with these youths was through creek tours. While the plan notes that some of the youth expressed feelings of calm, quietness, and serenity during their visits, in general, they expressed frustration that there weren't many amenities that were relatable to them in the Regional Trail Corridor. The non-motorized trail user group quickly identified a number of high conflict intersections in the planning process, which influenced the plan's recommendations. This group also noted that a variety of facility types and experiences are desired, such as skills courses for young bicyclists, single-track mountain biking, and natural surface hiking trails. Next slide, please. The Regional Trail Plan is the result of a robust public participation process that occurred at a variety of scales over the course of more than 2 years. The most prominent results of equitable engagement focus on accessibility and race and ethnicity. With regard to accessibility, one key feature is the system of accessible canoe and kayak launches at 3 locations in the corridor. Another accessibility enhancement is the extension of the trails farther west in the corridor. Despite efforts made by MPRB staff and others, the trail plan notes that some of the meetings held during the summer of 2019 were not welcoming places for anyone who didn't only want to talk about the roadway itself. Staff's work with citywide youth at the time was a counterpoint to those meetings, and some of the new recreation facilities proposed specifically address youth's frustration with the lack of relatable amenities. We'll talk more about those recreation facilities and more as we go through each trail segment over the next few minutes. Regardless of what MPRB is proposing through the trail corridor, ongoing implementation of the plan will require continued engagement. MPRB intends to reach beyond the trail corridor when engaging around detailed design projects. Next slide, please. As mentioned on the third slide, for the purposes of this regional trail plan, the trail corridor has been broken down into 4 segments. Segments 1 through 4 run west to east, and the first 3 segments include 1 or more focus areas that are discussed in the development concepts section of the staff report. In the interest of time, this presentation will not go into detail into the 4 focus areas, but will instead reference key focus area recommendations within each respective trail segment. Next slide, please. Segment 1 is the westernmost section of the regional trail corridor and is not bounded by the Parkway. It is unique in that it lacks paved trails for the majority of its length. Figure on the right is figure 4 in the staff report. Segment 1 includes 2 focus areas, Penn, Newton, Morgan in the center of the segment, and Lyndhurst on the eastern end. The plan for segment 1 is to improve wayfinding, promote access, and increase use of this segment. Entry points will be defined by signage, wayfinding kiosks, and trailhead amenities like bike parking, where active recreation or natural surface trails are present. New creek access points and a waterside lounge and picnic area are proposed. In order to make up for the lack of accessible trails in the Penn, Newton, Morgan focus area, the proposed Penn Avenue interpretive overlooks will make a visual connection to the creek for those unable to use the natural surface paths. The trail plan also proposes daylighting and re-meandering the tributary from Lake Harriet in the Lyndhurst focus area. At Lyndhurst Park, a boundary change is proposed. The land to be added is wholly owned by MPRB. However, local park amenities in Lyndhurst Park would continue to be classified as local and excluded from regional park system funding and visitor counts. Next slide, please. Segment 2 runs from Lyndhurst Park to 35W and is fully bounded by Minnehaha Parkway roads. It also includes 1 focus area, the Nicollet Hollow, or simply the Nicollet Focus Area, near the eastern end of the segment. The figure on the right is figure 5 in the staff report. The plan for segment 2 focuses on maintaining the natural feel of the trail network while improving access and safety for trail users. MPRB calls for rerouting many of the trails in order to accommodate stormwater best management practices, or BMPs, and adding flood storage by re-meandering portions of the creek. The plan also proposes 2 new creek access points, one of which will be Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA accessible. ADA accessible paved trails are proposed throughout the Nicollet focus area. Further, the reconstruction of the Nicollet Avenue underpass presents a unique opportunity to integrate play as a part of the bridge. A bouldering course fits the theme of nature-based active recreation and would offer a no-cost introduction to climbing. In addition to comfort amenities and gathering space, MPRB is also considering swings, creative lighting, and public art to make the underpass more welcoming and to enhance the recreation potential of the area. Next slide, please. Segment 3 runs from 35W to Cedar Avenue and is predominantly bounded by Parkway roads. This segment also has 1 focus area known as Portland and the Parkway, which includes the Bunny, an iconic piece of public art pictured here. The figure on the right is figure 6 in the staff report. To promote safety, MPRB recommends intersection improvements at many locations. Specific interventions will be determined in the detailed design phase. A 1-block segment of MPRB-owned frontage road is proposed to be removed west of Cedar Avenue. According to the plan, this road is used as a cut-through for vehicles, but is otherwise functionally redundant from a traffic standpoint. Removal of this excess impervious surface to make way for a stormwater BMP will provide water quality and flood benefits. Additions to the trail network include a new bridge near 10th Avenue, a bike tunnel beneath Cedar Avenue, and a new chorus of single-track bike trails between 12th and 16th Avenues. 4 new pickleball courts will replace the existing tennis courts in the Bloomington Activity Node, in between Bloomington and 16th Avenues, just north of East 50th Street. Back toward the western end of this segment, ADA accessible paved trails are proposed throughout the Portland and the Parkway focus area, and a revitalized area at the Bunny will offer drinking water, seating, and bike racks for visitors. Next slide, please. Segment 4 runs from the border of Nokomis Hiawatha Regional Park at 28th Avenue to 39th Avenue South. In this segment, trails and parkway roads are largely separated. No focus areas in segment 4. The figure on the right is figure 7 in the staff report. For cyclists, protected bikeways will be installed on Minnehaha Parkway to directly connect Nokomis Hiawatha and Minnehaha Regional Parks. From a water access perspective, the final takeout before Minnehaha Falls is proposed to be converted to an ADA accessible water access with available on-street parking, a new curb ramp, and an accessible path. Segment 4 currently has several underutilized tennis courts that are in poor condition. In order to diversify recreation offerings, the westernmost court is proposed to be removed and converted to an open pollinator play lawn. Courts at 32nd Avenue are slated to be repaired. The courts at 34th Avenue are proposed to be converted to a bike skills park. The plan also proposes the addition of a natural surface story walk, which will connect Nokomis Hiawatha Regional Park to Longfellow Gardens. The proposed story walk will provide a place where traditional foods and medicines and other native plants can ground visitors in a facet of Dakota culture that is rooted in the land. It will also be a space for Indigenous artists to create and showcase artwork. Next slide, please. The total estimated cost to implement the Regional Trail Corridor Plan over a 30-year period is $108,385,853. These costs are detailed by segment and focus area in the implementation chapter of the plan, where the text notes that, quote, not all of these costs will be borne by MPRB. The plan includes costs for a variety of elements that may be jointly implemented with partner agencies. Examples of such projects include road modifications, creek meanders, and stormwater BMPs. As such, the plan and its cost estimates are meant to guide the efforts of multiple agencies. I should note that the approval of this regional trail plan does not commit the council to any funding at this time. Next slide, please. The Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail Master Plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1 and Recreation Activities and Facilities Strategies 1 through 3, along with other council policies like those in Thrive MSP 2040. The June 7, 2021 submittal letter proposes classification of the existing tennis courts in the Regional Trail Corridor as, quote, regional. However, the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan clearly states that, quote, ball diamonds and tennis courts are not eligible for regional funding for improvement or expansion. Therefore, council staff do not recommend classifying existing tennis courts in the Regional Trail Corridor as regional. Next slide, please. The proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council first, approve Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail Master Plan, including the addition of 2 parcels detailed in the staff report and the supplemental information provided in the submittal letter dated June 7, 2021, the exception of classifying existing tennis courts as regional. And second, require Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, prior to initiating any new development of the Regional Trail Corridor, to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. And with that, I will stand for any comments or questions you may have and remind you that MPRB staff are on hand as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Colin. start off with any clarifying questions any commissioners may have.
Hi, this is Asata. I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Colin, can you explain again why you're making the exception of classifying existing tennis courts as regional? I don't think I quite understood it.
Absolutely. Yes, Chair Russo and Commissioner Brown. Yes, the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan states in fairly clear language that ball diamonds and tennis courts are to be excluded from regional park funding. And therefore, we felt, council staff felt that it was appropriate to exclude them from being considered as regional, as was proposed in the submittal letter dated June 7, 2021, excuse me, which was attached or appended to the business item for this master plan.
I
And-
totally missed hearing you say tennis courts. I heard the ball courts, but I didn't hear the tennis courts. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Hi, Tony. This is Cecily. I have some minor questions.
Sure.
So again, maybe this is back to the tennis courts and things like that. At the bottom of page 1, there's a paragraph that talks about how Lyndhurst Park will be excluded from funding and visitor counts. Well, I can totally understand how funding might not be provided for Lyndhurst, but how are you going to exclude it for visitor counts? Because aren't the visitor counts for the entire parkway as built? That's my first question of 4.
Okay, well, let's get started with that one. Mr. Chair and Commissioner Harris. The idea is, as in other parts of the regional park system, to exclude certain facilities that may be deemed local versus regional. And in the space of Lyndhurst Park, or the reimagined space that will be the future Lyndhurst Park, there's some facilities that we would deem or continue to deem local in nature. For example, a hockey rink, or perhaps other types of facilities that we would deem to be local in nature. And typically, as I understand our visitor use counts, those surveyors, if you will, would not count the people using those particular facilities in those particular places. Counts may still occur on other portions of the Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail, but they wouldn't be counted in that specific location.
Okay. Thank you. So my next question, and this could just be word choice, but I stumbled a little bit when there's a discussion of segment 1. I have 2 questions. There's a sentence in here that says segment 1 lacks legibility as a public park. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yeah, I could respond to that, or start with a response for that, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Harris. Yeah, what's a little bit different about segment 1 is that the paved regional trail and associated pedestrian trails don't extend into the westernmost portion of segment 1. The paved trail kind of turns north there to head up to Lake Harriet. And so the portions of the trail corridor that exist west of that, while there are some natural surface trails that go along Minnehaha Creek, it's not as well used, as I understand it, as certainly other portions of Minnehaha Parkway and the regional trail therein. And because of that lack of the paved trail in that portion, it doesn't have the same sort of navigability, perhaps, or legibility, as in people may not understand it as being a part of Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail Corridor.
Okay, I guess I understand that. It seems funny mentioning segment 1 as part of this whole conversation. So next, what is a waterside lounge?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Harris, I'm going to defer to the MPRB staff members to answer that one. It's a good question.
Okay. MPRB staff. Is this going to be Adam or somebody else?
I think Madeline looks like she's working on unmuting. I will take a quick moment while she's doing that to introduce Madeline Hudak, who's not presented before this body before. Madeline works in the planning division at the Park Board and was instrumental in this master plan and will also be its implementation champion going forward. And I think she can explain what a waterside lounge is.
Okay, Madeline.
All right, is everyone able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So a waterside lounge would be just kind of an area where near Minnehaha Creek where folks might be able to sit at either picnic tables or perhaps we might be able to incorporate some removable or kind of flexible seating. It's meant to be kind of a gathering area. We have a nature playground that's kind of adjacent to it. And so it's just meant to be kind of a gathering space near the water to provide access, but not necessarily kind of a launch type of water access point.
Great, thank you. And those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you, Cecily. Anybody else? Questions? Or anybody who would like to start us in with a motion for this?
Oh, okay, I will then. I'd be glad to move the proposed action that's shown on the screen before us.
Okay, we have a motion for the proposed actions from the staff report. Do we have a second for that?
This is Jeremy. I'll second.
Okay, we have a second from Jeremy. So that motion is that the Metropolitan Council approve Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's Minnehaha Parkway Regional Trail Master Plan, including the addition of 2 parcels detailed in the report and the supplemental information provided in the submittal letter dated June 7th, 2021, with the exception of classifying existing tennis courts as regional, and require Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, prior to initiating any new development of the regional trail corridor, to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Interceptor Engineering Assistant Manager. We have discussion on that motion.
Hey, everybody, this is Anthony. I
Yes,
have
Anthony.
a question for the team. Well, one, let me add some context for Commissioner Harris's question, about the counts. One thing about Lyndhurst Park as an area, it is really a very strong community recreation center, in terms of the role that it plays. And so lots of recreational activities for families and programming go on there, as well as the sports program, football, soccer, those things. So the counts, and why you wouldn't count them, so I understand that. But yeah, Cecily, if you ever get a chance to go there, you'll see that Lyndhurst, the park building over by Burroughs School, has its own character as a community recreation center and programming that happens there. And so it's a kind of a unique aspect of that. And one of the questions I had for MPRB, and as you all are looking at this, especially in South Minneapolis, this area has really very short connections to the rest of the recreation centers there, from McCrae, Phelps, what's the God, I can, there's, what I mean, there's a number of Bryant, you have a number of recreation centers that are relatively close. Is there any thought about how there might be some linkages in terms of programming or something that actually connects those communities to those rec centers, excuse me, or the activities that are happening there to this to the regional opportunity and experiences. Because I mean, I remember the work that you all did with youth and bringing them to the creek, and I remember some of the comments. And one of them, I mean, bottom line is some of them were just very like the kids didn't live far away, and they were like, well, like I've never been here before, you know, that kind of stuff. So as you all are looking at the master plan, and it doesn't typically include programmatic stuff, but it seems like we're leaning towards that. Have you all, you know, is there some aspect of that that is incorporated into this, and or is it even being talked about as an opportunity?
Yeah, Chair Yaruso, Commissioner Taylor, I'll maybe jump in on that one because it talks a little bit more about kind of system-wide operations. I think your assessment, Commissioner Taylor, of the current Lyndhurst Recreation Center is correct. It is a typical Minneapolis recreation center with sports programs and daycare and things like that. This master plan would profoundly re-envision that as essentially our second nature center. Believe it or not, Minneapolis, for all its parks, only has one nature center in our entire system. And we feel we want to do that because the master plan proposes to daylight the tributary down from Lake Hiawatha into the creek, creating a whole new natural resource opportunity that does not exist today because that tributary is mostly piped. And then we would have this nature center, community nature center on the banks of that new tributary. So I think inherently by that re-envisioning, it will become something unique amongst all the rest of those rec centers in our system. Incidentally, our Minneapolis Parks Comprehensive Plan, which is about to be adopted, envisions a citywide web model of how our recreation centers stitch together, and then also stitch to the regional park system. So by having a nature-focused nature center hub on the north side in North Mississippi, and also one on the south side to serve everyone south of downtown, we think these are going to become critical ways to connect folks at some of those more maybe nature deficit nature centers like Bryant and McRae into the entire Grand Rounds, and specifically to this location where we'll have basically two creeks coming together and a lake about 2 blocks away. So we do think it's a great opportunity for more connection to nature, which is why we have proposed to include the land area of Lyndhurst Park into the master plan, but to exclude those specific neighborhood amenities which will remain, such as tennis courts, ball diamonds, hockey rinks, basketball court, things like that.
Adam, thanks. That's great to hear. And you know, and I think especially for us, is there any because that's really pretty significant, and I think and particularly for people who know that with McRae, with Bryant, with Phelps Park, like you said, the fact that I'd really appreciate the way you talked about it as having a nature deficit, but they're very close to these, so I think that's a great plan. Does it, you know, particularly with this project, is that important? Because I didn't really get that, or I wasn't sure if it was made clear about the change that was happening in the Lyndhurst, because it's not real that particular. I wasn't sure if our commissioners knew about that change, but it really does make it a dramatic shift in terms of the way that the role that park plays, and connects that community to the rest of Minneapolis in an interesting way, because of, you talked about redlining, historical redlining, and I think that there's something about that Southwest community, you know, that exists because of that. So is there any way, or would it be important to include some aspect of that? Because that really makes this plan pretty monumental.
Yes, Chair Yaruso, Commissioner Taylor, I apologize if it's not clear about the programmatic connection. Sometimes we have to be careful about how the plan reaches out away into our neighborhood rec centers, lest we be accused of incorporating them into the regional park system. However, the Lyndhurst area focus area, which is in the document, I should make clear to the commissioners that the building that you see there is a brand new building. That is not our existing recreation center. The existing recreation center is south of 50th. It's isolated from other park spaces, including the creek, because it is separated by roadways from the creek. And we would build actually a new nature-focused facility on the north side of 50th on the banks of the new daylighted tributary. So that's one of the big moves in the plan, is to re-envision that confluence between the daylighted creek and Minnehaha Creek, right there by Lake Harriet, and that would be a brand new nature center.
Thanks, Adam. That's exciting, and like I said, anyway, that gives everybody some more context. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for those. Any other discussion?
This is Todd Kimmery. I did have a question and a comment then, please.
Yes, go ahead, Todd.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to, I haven't really had a reason, this is coming out wrong. I'm really appreciative and thankful to see how much of the ADA was taking into consideration for the disability community. This is exciting to see all these new additions that are going to be happening. So that's why I hadn't had a whole lot to talk about, because on a disability perspective, you guys have really hit the nail right on the head with this one. So, or out of the park, or one of those similes anyhow. But my question is this: you had mentioned a nature's park in the lounge area, if I could call it that. Is that play area existing, the nature play area existing? And if it is, is there any consideration to having accessibility components to that play area for children that have special needs? That's it.
Madeline, you want to go ahead and talk about that one?
Sure. So with regard to the nature play area that is within that Morgan focus area in segment 1, it is currently in the area where there are some natural surface trails and from an access standpoint, and we could potentially incorporate some accessibility elements, I think, into the play area. It is next to the tennis court, which has a paved trail. So I can make note of that for kind of our future implementation piece.
So let me follow up with a comment on that, because now you just painted a picture for me on that. So not every natural trail, has to be a paved trail, if you will, bituminous or asphalt, as some of us know it as. There are many other styles of surface additions that you can harden that up. And then there's sometimes the trail itself, it can be the scope and the slope of it can be, not as hindrance as, and still able to roll on if you had a mobility device. So I just went over this with the DNR about how some of their trails, they were concerned about different hardnesses. And anyways, I'm getting sidetracked here. My point here is that even if it's not a paved trail, and that's what's holding you back from adding accessibility features to a play area for children, I would ask you to rethink that, because there are ways, and I can be available to answer any questions away from today to help you with that understanding and be able to enlighten you a little bit on what's out there that's new on the market, that sort of thing. So I would like you to maybe reconsider and maybe get in touch with me so I can help with the process, and maybe we can have some play area for children with special needs.
Chair Uruso, can I take a brief moment?
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Thank you. Commissioner Kimmery, thank you so much for these thoughts, and I do always appreciate your insight. I want to clarify that the nature play area that's proposed there is not existing today. We do have nature play areas in our system, and they follow the same rules for accessibility as our regular play areas. So we would have to have an accessible route of some kind to that nature play area, and we would have to provide equivalent access. So I think I could confirm that yes, the nature play areas and other play areas, including the bouldering wall underneath the Nicollet Bridge, would have to be accessible under the auspices of ADA. But I also know that we can always go beyond what ADA specifically requires. So that's something that we'll continue to keep in mind.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate that. And I yield my time back to the, thank you, Chair. I yield my time back.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, it sounds like we are ready to proceed with a vote on this motion for the proposed action from the staff report. I can go ahead, Sandy.
Okay, I'm going to apologize in advance. My neighbor's mowing his lawn. We'll start with Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cecily Harris,
Aye.
Todd Kemry,
Todd says aye.
Bob Moeller, did we lose Bob? All right, I'll move on. Jeremy Peichel,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor,
Aye.
Canna Yang,
Aye.
Tony Russo.
Aye.
One more try for Bob Moeller. Oh, I see a thumbs up for Bob. We'll go with an aye on that. Thank you.
Okay,
Motion carries.
excellent. Thank you,
Aye.
everybody. Passed. That'll bring us on then to our second. I'm just hearing feedback myself or someone else trying to talk. I think it was just me. All right, we'll move on to our second business item for the Cleary Lake Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and land conversion for Three Rivers Park District. And again, we have Colin to present.
Okay. Hello again, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I am still Colin Kelly, planning analyst, and now I'm here to present the Cleary Lake Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and land conversion on behalf of Three Rivers Park District. I should note that Nathan Moe and Kelly Guzman of the Park District are both here today and may respond to questions after this presentation as needed. Next slide, please. Just gonna slide something over here real quick. Thank you. Cleary Lake Regional Park is located in the southwest portion of the regional park system in Scott County, and the proposed land conversion and the majority of the regional park is located in Credit River Township. The figures here are figure 1 and 2 in the staff report. The regional park is owned by Three Rivers Park District and is operated in partnership with Scott County. The existing master plan for the regional park was approved in 1998. Next slide, please. The focus of this plan amendment is a land conversion which proposes the removal of a small amount of land and the addition of a facility within the regional park. The figure on the right is figure 3 in the staff report. The land conversion will allow the Scott County Highway Department to make improvements to the County State Aid Highway, or CSA 27 corridor. In 2015, a traffic study was completed for the CSA 27 corridor. The study identified challenges within the segment being addressed by the current highway project, including an above-average crash rate. The study recommended a 4-lane divided roadway consistent with the segment to the north. Scott County would hold a permanent easement of 2.21 acres for the permanent road right-of-way and a temporary easement of 1.41 acres during construction of the roadway. In exchange for this removal, Three Rivers Park District proposes a channel stabilization project that will address channel erosion, reduce excess sediment being carried into Cleary Lake itself, and address flooding that is impacting park infrastructure. Minor impacts to the park's golf course and cross-country ski trail will also be mitigated. The land removal and the facility additions are both proposed in the northeast portion of the regional park. The appraised value of the removal land is $144,021, and the cost estimate of the facility additions is the same, $144,021. The table here is Table 1 in the staff report. Next slide, please. The Regional Parks Policy Plan details how such proposed land conversions are considered. Chapter 6, System Protection, Strategy 2, Conversions, states that, quote, lands in the regional park system will only be converted to other uses if approved by the Metropolitan Council through an equally valuable land or facility exchange. Further, the Council will consider conversion to other uses only if the conversion will not harm the regional park system. To determine whether regional park system lands may be exchanged for other land or facilities, the Regional Park System Policy Plan requires consideration of criteria relative to both the existing park system unit and the alternative use. This slide focuses on the existing park unit and the proposed land removal. Plan amendment states that the land removal will not impact the ability of the regional park to continue to meet council standards for a regional park. These standards are outlined in Chapter 4, Strategy 1 of the Regional Parks Policy Plan. The sliver of land required for the road right-of-way project will have minimal impact to park facilities, including the Cleary Loop Trail and a cross-country ski trail. Some early successional trees will need to be removed as well. In each of these instances, however, the recreation facilities will be made whole and replanting of trees will occur to screen park users from the roadway. Next slide, please. Chapter 6, Strategy 2 also requires consideration of criteria relative to the alternative use. In this case, we're talking about an equally valuable facility where natural resource benefits are increased as a result of the exchange. At Cleary Lake Regional Park, the project proposes to stabilize 710 linear feet of channel and provide flood protection to an irrigation pump house. That channel delivers approximately 12 tons of suspended solids and 2.41 pounds of phosphorus into Cleary Lake itself annually. The project will benefit the region by improving water quality, supporting recreational activities, and supporting stewardship of natural resources in the park and watershed. Without the channel stabilization project, erosion of sediment and nutrients into Cleary Lake would continue and potentially compromise the future operations of the irrigation pump house. Next slide, please. The Cleary Lake Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and land conversion is consistent with the requirements of the Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Chapter 6, Strategy 2, and Chapter 4, Strategy 1, along with other council policies such as those in Thrive MSP 2040. Next slide, please. The proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council first approve the Cleary Lake Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and land conversion, and second, approve the permanent release of the restrictive covenant on 2.21 acres of land and the temporary release of the restrictive covenant on 1.41 acres of land within Cleary Lake Regional Park, a total of 3.62 acres, in exchange for a channel stabilization project within Cleary Lake Regional Park. And with that, I will stand for any comments or questions you may have. Mind you that the Three Rivers Park District staff is on hand as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Colin. What questions do we have on this one? I know this is the type of thing that some of us have seen before, but not everybody has.
Oh, sure, I'll jump in. Colin, I'm curious whether there was any public engagement on this topic with neighbors or park users? I don't see that in the report. I only see that it went to the Board of Commissioners.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Harris, I would defer to the Three Rivers Park District staff on hand to address that question, as I do not believe it was addressed in the submittal information provided.
Thank you, Commissioner, for the question. My name is Nathan Moe, park planner down in Scott County. So in this case, there was not a significant amount of engagement directly related to this this mitigation that we are proposing. Staff has had a lot of input on different elements of the, or excuse me, staff from different departments have had significant input on this, and we've made sure that that was very comprehensive. There was some engagement work done during the highway project, and I was present at many of the open houses presenting that the impacts to Cleary were recognized, and there was very little input provided from the public at those. But so there was minimal work done during the county highways engagement efforts, and there seemed to be little feedback. I think people were generally pleased to hear that our plans were to make sure that the park would continue to operate as it does today.
I can add a little bit additional to that. Nathan has been leading a park master plan update, and as part of that, we've really learned that the recreation facilities that are currently within the park, especially those tied to the lake, are well loved and certainly popular. And by improving the natural resources, especially of water going into the lake, that helps preserve that recreation opportunity and that offering that we provide. So that was one of the reasons why we selected this project as a mitigation or an exchange project for the land conversion request. We felt that it really did still tie very closely to the recreation offerings that the park already provides, and that we have absolutely learned through the master planning process that's currently ongoing that the community would like to see continue and enhanced moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions on this?
This is Jeremy. I have some questions.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. So I can't really tell from the map, but I'm looking at figure 4 in the work item and seeing the project right-of-way extension, and wondering if there's any concern about drainage to Cleary Lake, particularly in the northern section of that right-of-way. I think that's north. Yes, I'm not looking at, I don't see an arrow, so I'm assuming the top portion is north. So in that, I see that it's reasonably close to the shoreline of Cleary Lake. I'm wondering if there's been any discussion with Scott County about mitigation, particularly of chloride pollution coming off the highway. Thank you.
Good question.
Sorry, I was still muted. So not specifically about chloride. I know we've done some analysis about phosphorus and other suspended solids coming in on the northeast corner of the park. One of the reasons we really like this channel stabilization project is because it, combined with the holding ponds associated with the roadway, the cumulative effect of the water quality impact on Cleary Lake is going to be a strong positive. So, you know, I think combining this with those holding ponds really should result in a significant amount of suspended solids and phosphorus that are currently going into the lake. I've been working with the water quality manager Brian Vlock, and he hasn't mentioned specifically the chloride, but I can certainly ask him. Unfortunately, he's not on the call tonight to answer that.
I appreciate that. A follow-up, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the figure 5 now, the channel stabilization image, and it seems like it's right through the middle of the 9 hole. Is that correct? This is within that facility?
It is not. It is on the outskirts of hole 2, 3, and 5.
Okay.
And just near hole 4 as well. It's probably a little bit difficult to tell on that map.
It really is. And my only concern there was how much of responsibility is placed on the management of that golf course for the restoration action. That is to say, are there, this is, I assume, managed by an agreement or a concession contractor, and are they responsible for phosphorus loading in that channel?
The golf course is part of the regional park and is operated by us. It is a non-enterprise golf course with a focus on learning and camps. So we are responsible for that.
Okay. And along with that, are there fees collected for the use of that course?
That is correct. There are.
Okay. So what proportion, I guess, of those fees are going to this restoration, or is it exclusively the exchange for the right-of-way that's funding the restoration project?
It is the latter, exclusively the funding from this exchange that would support this stabilization project.
Okay, last question, and I promise.
Sure.
In terms of long-term maintenance, especially with a golf course, you're going to continue to have some runoff issues that'll deteriorate that stabilization over time under the future predicted climate. What sort of long-term maintenance funding do you have secured or planned to make sure that this project retains its environmental benefits?
So specifically funding, I think I don't know that there's line items associated with that, but we are working closely with our maintenance team, and then part of the design of the stabilization project is at the outfall a holding area that sediment should be able to settle, and the maintenance team will be going in there on an annual or semi-annual basis, removing that sediment that will settle in that area, and then it will continue to be able to operate as a functional channel that is limiting the amount of suspended solids.
Okay, and so you have a spoils plan to go along with that dredge material, or you will?
Yes, the park maintenance team has talked about making sure that that is an element of their annual maintenance.
Okay, that's all I've got. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions or anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the proposed action.
Okay, we have a motion by Anthony for the proposed action from staff report. Is there a second for that?
This is Monica. I second that.
Thank you, Monica. Our motion then is that the Metropolitan Council approve Three Rivers Park District's Cleary Lake Regional Park Master Plan Amendment and land conversion, and approve the permanent release of the restrictive covenant on 2.21 acres of land and the temporary release of the restrictive covenant on 1.41 acres of land within Cleary Lake Regional Park, a total of 3.62 acres, in exchange for a channel stabilization project within Cleary Lake Regional Park. Is there any discussion on that motion?
This is Jeremy. I'd like to offer something briefly.
Yes, Jeremy.
So I am not in support of this motion. I believe that there has been insufficient consideration of pollutants apart from phosphorus and sediment in this plan, and I'd like to see more robust planning for highway pollutant mitigation and the long-term outlook for channel stabilization given the land use proximate to its project site. So I will be voting against this motion. Thank you.
Okay, is there further discussion?
Yeah, and Tony, this is Cecily. I also won't be supporting this motion for a slightly different reason. I really, after a year in park management and a decade as an elected board member of an open space district, I came to hate eminent domain and transfer of parkland to non-park agencies for non-park uses. I think it's a terrible precedent. And as we used to say on the Mid-Penn board, they aren't making more land, and we should keep what we have restricted.
To clarify on that, in the past, we've seen some conversions where it's been a trade of taking out some land and adding in some other land. Are you generally okay with that kind of thing and just objecting because this time we're getting something in return that's not actual land for the
Yeah,
value?
it's case by case. I am favorable about the next, you know, item, our next business item for different reasons.
Okay. Thank you for that. Is there other discussion? I think those are both good points. This is a little bit different than how we've seen land exchange done before. Jeremy, your concern, I think, goes a little over the heads of some of us because you have a little more expertise here. Do you have kind of a basic summary of what some of the things you would like to see might look like?
Yeah, so if I were to do this myself, I would want to see more engagement with the highway folks to demonstrate their best management practices planned along that land that will be exchanged. Because right now, as parkland, it is not, as forested parkland, it is not contributing pollutants like oil, grease, chloride into Cleary Lake. It is in fact filtering or at least slowing the transmission of those pollutant fluxes into the lake as an intervening land use. So the reduction of that buffer poses an environmental threat, especially given under high precipitation forecasted in I guess large surge events in the future climate. I could see this being a challenge if there isn't some sort of berm or deeper ditching or some sort of modification to that land to intercept highway runoff, because that overland flow is going to carry everything from the road into Cleary Lake if there isn't some sort of constructive use that's going to block that flow. And then with the channel itself, golf courses are always a challenge to mitigate phosphorus in particular. Sediment obviously goes along with that. And this idea of exchanging land that is currently protecting the lake from road pollution for a project improvement as a mitigation, I don't know that that's the best use of funds. And I'm not going to say, as Cecily did, I agree with her thought on they're not making more land and we should protect what we have. But I think exchange of services for land is not of superior benefit to the regional park system. I think that because this is a facility that the parks manage, the parks should be responsible for operationally including those costs of mitigating the impact of our uses on the resource. And so selling land to do work that we should already be funding, to me, is a misuse of the land and of the funds associated with it.
Chair, could I comment?
Yeah, I think we can allow that.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I just wanted to add that when there is a land conversion or a land exchange, staff does an analysis, and we negotiate an equally valuable exchange. In this case, it's a little unique of a circumstance in that this is a park that's located in Scott County, but it's managed by Three Rivers Park District. As Kelly Grissman will tell you, Three Rivers Park District owns and operates 2 parks in Scott County. This one, Cleary, and a second one, Murphy Hanrahan. And the only reason I bring this up is I just want the commissioners to know that our first choice is always to replace the land with land for an equally valuable land exchange. In this instance, there was not an inholding available in Cleary Lake. Our next choice is then to go to replacement land in another park. There was not any inholdings available in Murphy Hanrahan. At this point, we went to the equally valuable facility exchange, and Three Rivers, in partnership with Scott County, came up with this idea of doing an environmental project to protect the water resources in Cleary Lake. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. And Green.
Tony, this is Monica. May I say something, please?
Yes, go ahead.
I'll try to be brief. After 7 years of being in the park board in Brooklyn Park, I have seen exchanges like this before, but we can find a way to get land from land, and the priority is to get one of the most expensive projects that you could think about it, that we won't have the resources to do it, to change it, because land is precious, and I totally agree with that. With Cecile, I totally agree on that. But sometimes maintaining this land is very expensive, and this is one of those cases. I know channel stabilization is hard to do; it's very expensive, and I think the acres are not so bad. As for the road exchange with the pollution into the water, I don't have all the expertise on this one as you, Jeremy, but I do believe that if the highway needs to be increased in this land, I'm sure the pollution is already there. There are cars, there is traffic, there is contamination that although some part of the trees are going to block, not everything is blocked, and all the smoke is going already where it is. So I don't know what is better if you try to open and we can have an agreement that they will check how the water is going to stay clean, all the channels are going to work, or let it be like it is right now, and then all the pollution is going to stay right on top of the lake and is going to jeopardize the natural resources as well. That's one of the reasons that I find this project very interesting and actually positive in my point of view. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you, Monica. Part of this is I don't know that we've ever had this type of thing where we're calling a project a facility, essentially. It's kind of that when we're doing the conversions, we're talking more, I guess, sort of permanence stuff that's there. And it's a little interesting to wrap head around the idea of doing an improvement project as a facility to exchange. I tend to kind of agree with Jeremy that that sort of thing is just stewardship of the existing facilities rather than getting a new facility in exchange. And maybe if they were saying that there is no land to exchange, that might be kind of a hint for us about the value of having our land.
Chair Uruso, one other piece of information.
Yeah.
If I may. That's exactly the situation here, in that there wasn't land for land exchange. And the process that I laid out, that the priority is always to exchange land for land, and then you move eventually to get land for facility. That is laid out in our regional parks policy plan. That's in the system protection strategy that's governed by strategy 2, land conversion. So I just wanted to let commissioners know that we got to this point by following the policy plan guidance. Thank you.
Emmett, with that is, I guess, expanding on what Chair Yaruso was saying, is facility inclusive of environmental improvements like channel stabilizations? That definition of facility is inclusive of those features?
Chair Yaruso and Chair Peichel, yes. The um, policy clearly states land for facility, including natural resource projects. So in some ways, I really love this project because like rather than like a play area or a picnic shelter, we're getting something that will provide an environmental benefit to the park.
I'm attempting to look through this again to see that language. Can you point to where that might be in our report?
It's on
Or
page 6
page 6. Okay.
under the land conversion paragraph.
Tony, while
Well,
you're looking for that, I can read the policy plan. It says equally valuable facility is defined as the exchange of land for facilities when recreational benefits and or natural resource benefits are increased as a result of the exchange. So I could go
okay,
more.
so
But
the nuance there that I'm getting hung up on is it says an exchange of land for facilities. That's when those things are increased. It's a little bit different than saying that the increase of natural resource benefits itself is a facility. See what I'm getting at there?
Chair, I see your point, and our staff interpretation is that a facility could include a natural resource project, that's not only, it could, but like we would encourage that.
Okay. Further discussion on that?
This is Bob.
Yes,
Can
Bob.
you hear me?
Yes.
I think that the amount of land involved is relatively small. And the benefits of the reduction in pollution is significant. And so I will vote in favor.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Anyone else? All right, hearing none, I guess we're good to proceed with a vote. Sandy, you can go ahead with that.
Okay, we're going to start with Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cecily Harris,
No.
Todd Kemry,
Todd says aye.
Bob Moeller,
Bob says aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
No.
Anthony Taylor,
Yes.
Kana Yang,
Aye.
Tony Russo. All
No.
right, the motion carries.
Thank you. So that has passed 6-3. And that brings us on to our third business item, a Mississippi River Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment and Land Conversion and Riverfront Regional Park Master Plan Amendment for Anoka County. And this time we have Tracey Kinney to present.
you can't hear me because I'm on mute. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Wonderful. Hello, my name is Tracey Kinney. I'm a senior planner in Parks. And today I'm going to, actually first, today I wanted to just mention that I am joined by Karen Blaska from Anoka County, who's going to help with some questions at the end. So today, the item before you is Mississippi River Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment and land conversion, and the Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park Acquisition Master Plan Amendment. Next slide, please. So this is another land conversion, and the trail in the park, the Anoka County Mississippi River Regional Trail and the Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park are located within the northwest part of the regional park system, and that's the image to the left, and that's figure 1 in your business item. The amendments that we're talking about today are located in the city of Fridley in the southern part of Anoka County, and that's the middle image, and that's figure 2 in your business item. The Mississippi River Regional Trail is located within the Mississippi National River Recreation Area and the Mississippi River Corridor Critical Area. It's a 24-mile trail that follows the Mississippi River from the southernmost part of Anoka County all the way up to the northernmost part of Anoka County. The Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park is located in the city of Fridley. The park consists of approximately 140 acres, and it's split between 2 units, and it's connected with the Mississippi River Regional Trail. So the focus, and that's so the focus of the item today is 2 amendments that's located in the southern portion of Anoka County, shown in both the image 2 and image 3. The focus of the amendments includes selling 0.3 acres of trail corridor land to the city of Minneapolis for expansion of their waterworks facility in exchange for adding 0.3 acres of riverfront land, expanding the southern border of the Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park. And again, that image to the right is figure 3 in your business item. Next slide, please. So diving in here, the image to the right of you shows the removal land and the replacement land. The removal land is towards the bottom of the image, and it's in those yellow boxes. The replacement land is towards the north, towards the top of the image, and it's hashed out in yellow as well. And that image is also figure 4 in your business item. So the council only considers land conversions in the regional park system if it doesn't harm the system, and there's an equally valuable exchange. An equally valuable exchange is generally defined as one being contiguous to the park or trail and having similar or better natural resources and recreational opportunities. The removal land and replacement land are similar in size. They are 3 acres of land, so very small pieces of land here. The removal land is a small parcel of remnant land valued at $36,900 that juts out from the trail but doesn't overlap it. The land is currently used as a kiosk area. Its natural resource is turf grass and trees. A recent improvement in the Riverfront Regional Park added a trailhead for the trail itself, creating this redundancy of this kiosk area. Since the land is not connected to parkland, the county takes on additional maintenance costs to care for it. The replacement land, so the land that we're replacing it with, is valued at $33,500. It's an equally valuable exchange since it's contiguous to both the park and the trail, making it far easier and less costly to maintain. The land is comprised of Mississippi River shoreline and trees, which is considered better natural resources quality than the removal property, since shoreline is prioritized in the regional park system. And finally, the land has better potential for recreation since it expands the opportunities in the park boundary. The removal land was acquired with Metropolitan funds. When the council funds land acquisitions or development in the regional park system, the council puts a restriction on the land that ensures the land will be used for regional recreational open space in perpetuity. Approval of this amendment would remove the council restriction on the removal land, allowing Anoka County to sell the land to the city of Minneapolis for expansion of their water treatment facility that surrounds the property. Removing land from the regional park system requires an equally valuable level of restriction. Therefore, the replacement land will include the same restriction. The removal and replacement land will be exchanged between Anoka County and the city of Minneapolis at no cost under a cooperative effort. Next slide, please. So the second part of this business item focuses on the replacement land expanding the park boundary of Anoka County, of the Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park. Anoka County will include a development concept for this portion of the park when they conduct their next master plan amendment or master plan for the park itself. The 0.3 acres of land adds 55 feet to the existing 1.3 miles of shoreline within the park. The replacement land increases the acreage slightly. It expands the opportunities for recreation, and it's easier to maintain since it's contiguous with the park. Additionally, there is no additional costs since I just mentioned it was conveyed, the land was conveyed, will be conveyed under a cooperative effort with the city of Minneapolis. Next slide, please. So the rationale for the proposed action is that the Mississippi River Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment and Land Conversion and Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park Acquisition Master Plan Amendment is consistent with the requirements in the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, specifically Planning Strategy 1 and System Protection 2, and other council policies, particularly Thrive 2040. So next slide, please. So the proposed action before you today is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Mississippi River Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment, approve the Anoka County Riverfront Park Acquisition Master Plan Amendment, and approve the release of the restrictive covenant on 0.33 acres of land within the Mississippi River Regional Trail in exchange for adding 0.33 acres of land with a restrictive covenant to expand the boundary of the Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park. And finally, to require Anoka County, prior to initiating any new development of the regional trail corridor, to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Division Assistant Director. And with that, I'll respond to any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions on that?
Hi, this is Monica. I'm probably just curious about this, but why is the difference of $3,400? And can we get Thanks.
Differences in the appraisals, you mean?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm guessing it's because of the side of the land or something, but I was just curious, like, well, you can buy trees with that, no, or something?
Chair, Commissioners, that's an excellent question. I don't have the answer for you. Maybe Karen Blaska can. It's a typical statement of value that was provided. So it's the 2020 assessed value.
Karen, are you available to speak to that at all?
I am, thank you. Yes, we actually worked with the county assessor's office to get a statement of value for that. They did value the replacement property slightly less than the other one, only because of its location and proximity to road access. The land we are conveying to the city has road access right there. But in as far as I am concerned, us getting the shoreline makes up for that $3,000.
So there's kind of a difference in how it would be valued to a private party versus what the value is to the park agency.
Yes,
Correct.
which I actually agree. I mean, it's waterfront and the other one doesn't. But I was just curious because the other one was right to the cent and this one wasn't. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for the question. Any other questions?
And
Or
Mr.
if any-
Chair, if I could just add one thing.
Sure.
The city of Minneapolis is currently using the replacement land as part of their property, of course. And so once we do the conveyance, the city will be responsible for moving their fence line back and actually restoring the replacement land so that right now there's some gravel on there and they're using it for vehicle storage. So the vehicles will come out, the gravel will come out, and they will restore that area to a native seed mix for us.
Okay, which has a cost that is not reflected in here as well.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have other questions or anyone wants to start us in on a motion?
Tony, I'll offer the motion to move forward the proposed action from the staff report.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Do we have a second for that?
I second it.
Okay, we have a second from Asada. Thank you. So that motion is that the Metropolitan Council, 1, approve the Mississippi River Regional Trail Master Plan Amendment, 2, approve the Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park Acquisition Master Plan Amendment, 3, approve the release of the restrictive covenant on 0.33 acres of land within the Mississippi River Regional Trail in exchange for adding 0.33 acres of land with a restrictive covenant to expand the boundary of the Anoka County Riverfront Regional Park. And 4, require Anoka County, prior to initiating any new development of the regional trail corridor, to send preliminary plans to the Metropolitan Council's Environmental Services Division Manager. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Couldn't have said it better myself. I do have a comment, Tony, if I may.
Yes, Jeremy.
Okay, so I appreciate Karen's last offering on the restoration activity that will occur because I can see from figure 5 that the site is in no condition to be integrated with the rest of the Riverfront Regional Park in terms of its current environmental benefits. So I'm glad to hear that, and I look forward to seeing what happens with this space.
Thank you, Jeremy. Other discussion? I guess I'll just point out that I do appreciate, compared to our last discussion, that this is a much more straightforward kind of facility conversion, land for land. We have, other kinds of facilities that aren't land, but this is certainly the simplest form. So I think this kind of gets to what you were probably saying, Cecily, of you saying you support it. This one sounds like it's a little bit different in how we're presenting it.
Yes.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll proceed with a vote on that motion. Go ahead, Sandy.
Okay, we'll start with Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cecily Harris,
Aye.
Todd Cambry,
Todd says aye.
Bob Moeller,
Bob says aye.
Jeremy Pico,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor,
Aye.
Hannah Yang, Tony Russo.
Aye.
The motion carries.
Okay, thank you. So that's approved. And we will move on to our fourth and final business item, a big marine park reserve master plan amendment and another land conversion, this time for Washington County. And we have Tracey Kinney presenting again.
Thanks, Chair. Commissioners, can you hear me again?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So once again, my name is Tracey Kinney and I'm a senior planner in parks. And I'm joined today with Sandy Brower and Sharon Price from Washington County. And the item before you is the Big Marine Park Reserve Master Plan Amendment and Land Conversion. And this is on behalf of Washington County. Next slide, please. So Washington County's Big Marine Park Reserve is located within the northeast part of the regional park system, and the left image is figure 1 in your business item. The amendment is a land conversion that is located in the city of Scandia in the northern part of Washington County, and that's figure 2, and that's the middle image that you're looking at. And we'll get to the land conversion in a second, but I just wanted to preview that this is a beautiful park with excellent natural resource features. It includes Big Marine Lake and St. Croix Valley Moraine, which features rolling hills and wetland depressions. When completed, the park will be 1,800 acres with 80% of the acreage set aside for preservation and protection. Preserving 80% of the land is characteristic of a park reserve in the regional park system. So today, there are 205 acres that are open to the public that includes park facilities, including a boat lodge, cross-country ski, fishing pier, hiking, and trails, and more. The focus of this amendment is a land conversion that includes selling 2.42 acres of park reserve land to the American Veterans Rest Camp Association for expansion of their existing camp to the south of the property, in exchange for adding 2.42 acres of Big Marine Lake shoreland for natural resource management and lake access. And the image to the right is figure 3 in your business item. The Veterans Rest Camp is a private holding residing adjacent to the park reserve outside the park reserve boundary. It is shown in the red in the image all the way to the right. It's a hatched red pattern. The American Veterans Rest Camp Association is a private nonprofit corporation that provides relief and recreation at the Veterans Rest Camp to military veterans and their families as part of the continuous reintegration process. Next slide, please. So before you are 2 images that show the removal and replacement land, and those are to the right. So the removal land is in both images to the left, and the replacement land is in both images to the right. And then the table is figure 1 in your business item, and those figures are figures, I think, 4 and 5 in your business item. So the council, as I had mentioned before, the council only considers land conversions in the regional park system if it doesn't harm the system and if there's an equally valuable exchange. And just to remind you that an equally valuable exchange is generally defined as land as being contiguous to the land, being contiguous to the park or trail, and having similar or better natural resources and recreation potential. So Washington County's removal and replacement land have similar acreage and similar natural resources. Both parcels consist of 2.4 acres and have Big Marine Lake shoreline and forest. Where they differ is the recreational potential. The removal land is only accessible from the Veterans Camp, which is adjacent to the removal land to the south. So you see that in the bottom left-hand corner image. The removal land is otherwise inaccessible to recreation opportunities due to wetlands, drainage ways, and the lake itself. The replacement land, in comparison, has better recreational potential since it is easy to access by the surrounding park reserve land, and this will allow for our future trail and expansion of other opportunities. The removal land was acquired also with Metropolitan Council funds. It has that same restriction on it, which ensures the land will be used for regional recreational open space in perpetuity. So approval of this amendment would remove the council restriction on the removal land allowing Washington County to sell the land to the American Veterans Rest Camp Association for $15,660. And this is 90% of $17,395, which is the 2020 assessed value. The replacement land was conveyed from the city of Scandia to Washington County at no cost under a cooperative effort. It is valued at $382,200. An equally valuable exchange also requires an equal level of restriction, so that replacement land will also include the same restriction. Next slide, please. So the rationale for this proposed action is that the Big Marine Park Reserve Master Plan Amendment and land conversion is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1 and System Protection 2, and other council policies, specifically Drive 2040. Next slide, please. The proposed action before you is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Big Marine Park Reserve Master Plan Amendment and to approve the release of the restrictive covenant on the 2.42 acres of land within the Big Marine Park Reserve in exchange for adding a restrictive covenant on the 2.42 acres of land within the boundary of Big Marine Park Reserve. And with that, I'll respond to any questions.
What questions do commissioners have on this one? If no one else does, I have some. I'm trying to wrap my head around some details of this because a lot of our other land conversion stuff has involved changing the boundaries of a park, and it appears this one does not. So the newly acquired land is going to stay within the park for future park reacquisition potentially if the rest camp no longer needs it. But that also means that the one being acquired is already within the boundary and is being given by a different party, not the rest camp, at no cost. So isn't that a parcel that the park agency would have been acquiring anyway? And I'm not sure what the tie is between these two exactly.
Thanks, Chair Urso. I could start off the answer here or the response. At the moment that the American Vets Camps Association came to Washington County staff, Washington County started working with the adjacent municipalities, City of Scandia being one of them, and they found an equally valuable exchange, this parcel, and earmarked it for this exchange immediately. Does Sandy Burr or Sharon Price want to add on to this?
Tracey. Thank you, Tracey. Thank you, Chair Yaruso. That's about the right scenario to put it. The Disabled Veterans Rest Camp came to us for the request, and we didn't have any land at the time, so we did look at the replacement is always to be in kind or in similar natural resources, and we noticed that the city had this piece in there, and they were willing to be a part of the project, so to speak, for the replacement. And so they were willing to release it. It's within the park boundary. We didn't have to amend the park boundary to add it in. It's already in there. And so it ended up being a good fit for everyone here.
So that was not a sale that was already underway, and whether explicitly stated or not is essentially contingent upon this going through.
No, we didn't. We went to the city of Scandia and we found out that they were the owners of that piece, so that we could see if they would be willing to relinquish it to us for as part of this conversion. And they felt it was a good fit for the project as well. So we didn't have it ahead of time. We sought it out after the Veterans Rest Camp came to us for their request.
Okay. Anybody else come up with any questions or?
Hi, this is Cecily. I do have a question.
Yes, Cecily.
And I support this project. I'm probably out kayaking on Big Marine about once a week as I live just a few miles down the road. I've always heard good things about the Veterans Rest Camp. And I believe House Member Dentner just secured a large amount of state funds for facility improvements. So the question I have, and I got a little confused in the report, is a conservation easement being kept on that 2.42 acres? Is it still restricted for park use?
Chair, Commissioners, thank you for that question. No, the land will not be restricted for the removal land will not be restricted for with an environmental covenant that you mentioned. I was trying to remember what you said. We will be removing the council restrictive covenant and not replacing it with an additional covenant.
And what is the additional covenant? That's what I'm getting confused about.
The one that you had just mentioned, an environmental covenant.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I may have confused matters a little bit too when I was talking about boundaries. For just a little bit of history on this, in the original plan for Big Marine Regional Park, the area that is this rest camp was included in the park boundary. And we had a previous request several years back that amended the master plan for the park to draw out that whole property. So it is no longer included in the boundaries of the park for future acquisition. Because they said essentially we plan to keep operating for quite a while. It may still end up being included in the park at some point in the distant future, but it would be another boundary acquisition to put it back in. But in this case, the part where they're going to be getting an additional piece of property, that removed parcel is still going to be within the master plan boundary as park, so that if the rest camp does stop using it and wants to resell it or something, then it would fall under the usual acquisition things for things within a park boundary differently than the rest of their property. So it's not a restrictive covenant, but it does impact potential process for reacquisition and how it gets planned and all that kind of.
Chair Urso, I just want to confirm that that's totally correct. It's characterized as an in-holding now. So, or it will be once the council acts on it then. So the replacement property was an in-holding, and now the removal property will move from a piece of owned land that's within the boundary to an in-holding for future acquisition, if and when the vets camp decides to cease to exist.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or anyone that wishes to make a motion?
This is Monica. I can make the motion to approve the Big Marine Park Reserve and the release of the restrict covenant and the other part that I think you read well better than me, Tony.
Sure. Okay, so we have a motion for the proposed action from the staff report. Do we have a second on that?
I'll
Todd will second this.
I heard Cecily first, and it's in her district, so I'm going to give it to her.
Nicely done. That's right.
So that motion is that the Metropolitan Council approve the Big Marine Park Reserve Regional Big Marine Regional Park Reserve Master Plan Amendment and approve the release of the restrictive covenant on 2.42 acres of land within the Big Marine Park Reserve in exchange for adding a restrictive covenant on 2.42 acres of land within the boundary of Big Marine Park Reserve. Is there any discussion on that motion? hands. Okay, I guess hearing none, we'll proceed with a vote on that. Go ahead, Sandy.
Sorry about that. We'll start with Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cecily Harris,
Aye.
Todd Kemry,
Todd says aye.
Bob Moeller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor,
Aye.
Canna Yang,
Aye.
and Tony Russo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Right, that is approved. Thank you, everybody. That'll bring us on to our information item, which is our equity nudge for the month. We have some reflections on recent regional parks research, our visitor study, youth, and some other things. We have Darcy Vandegrift to present.
Chair
on this.
Uruso, could I ask a question of the group?
Sure.
And to you, really, it's almost 6 o'clock. We are able to move ahead on this. I think the total time is about 15 minutes, or we would be happy to table it until next month. So completely your call.
I think if we're thinking of 15 minutes, that's not too bad. That only puts us like 10 over. So we can do that. If people want to get into more detailed discussion on it, and we want to go beyond that time, then we can pick that up again next month. We'll
Thank
let
you,
you at
Tim.
least start with your presentation and see where we go from there.
Great, thank you, Chair Russo. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Darcy Vandegrift. I am a parks researcher and a principal researcher in community development. I don't get the privilege of being before you very often as a resident of the region. Let me start quickly by just saying thank you for doing the very hard work of serving on MPOSC. I'm sure you're feeling that 2 hours into your commitment this evening. Emmett has asked me to be brief, if I can go back and put my staff hat on. I want to share some ideas with you and hear your advice and perspectives, but I also want to issue the invitation if you would like to go in depth with any of this. I'm happy to connect with you offline or come back to another meeting. But I'm sharing with you this evening some observations based on recent parks research that I have done. And the kind of crux of the idea I want to share with you is that while we often rely on statistics to show us patterns, both across our entire system or to drill down on specific topics, I want to talk about how we also need to bring in, or how I found it valuable to bring in stories as an important source of insight, and share some observations from recent parks research looking at the issue of safety, which of course is extremely important if we're thinking of how to build a welcoming, inclusive, and I would say anti-racist park system. Greg, could you advance to the next slide, please? So you see a table on the right, and that is one table from the 2016 visitor study, which I was not yet on staff when this study was done, but it does ask an important question. It says, on this park and trail visit, were you concerned about your safety? And over 5,000 visitors to the regional park system answered this question, and their choices were in closed-ended questions, not at all, very little, moderately, and substantially, sorry. And you'll see here that the total, if you look quickly at the orange box, you see 91% said there were no concerns with safety, and 9% reported either very little, moderately, or substantially. Now, we begin to break it down with a tiny bit of disaggregated data. In other words, data that is peeled apart by a very crude divide between what they call, using some outdated language, but what we could call looking at white and what they're calling non-white or BIPOC respondents. And you do see a difference in pattern here of 92% of white respondents said no concerns and 7% very little. But when we look at the right column where with BIPOC respondents, we see 14% said that they had some or very little concern about safety. In other words, it was not, they did not feel that there was no concern whatsoever. And you even see what would be a tiny number of people saying substantially, but it was still 1%. So what does this table show us? It shows a difference between how white and, I'm going to use the term non-white, visitors feel about park and trail safety during their one visit that they had in 2016. There's little data disaggregation here. There's some outdated naming terms that do not reflect current states of thinking about race and ethnicity. And also, I would suggest that if we stopped here with looking at this table to try to understand how people felt safe or unsafe in the park system, we might find that statistics were hiding the impact of safety events that didn't tell the entire story. Could we go to the next slide, please, Greg? So I'm suggesting, and a perspective that we're working to shift in thinking about useful data for building a more welcoming, inclusive, and anti-racist park system, is that qualitative data really gives an important context. It can ask some questions that statistics can't, like, what does it mean to feel concerned about safety? That question on the last slide. But also, could the meaning of safety look different to different communities? And also, you remember on that last slide, there was 1% of people felt substantially unsafe. And what can we think about, or what are the ripple effects of a one-time event? Even if a very small number of people in a statistic are reporting an experience, how does that ripple out? So how could qualitative research, where we focus on these emphases on this slide, meanings, what does safety mean? Feelings, how does an event affect or impact a person? Histories, how does a safety event fit within my community's history, the person? So when we focus on meanings, feelings, and histories, we can look at stories that people tell, either in interviews or in engagements or in focus groups. We can in-depth observations that people make and or that we can observe in the parks, or through photos, visual data that's also qualitative. We can look at that important context that can take us back to thinking about meanings, feelings, and history. So I'd like to share one example with you on the next slide, please. So I wanted to share a little bit on how diving in depth with qualitative research can offer an opportunity to understand this really crucial component of thinking about safety in parks. And the information I'm going to very briefly share with you came from the Youth and Park study, which was recently published online. And I am going to try to get the chat here. I'm going to put a link to the research in the chat so you can see, check it out in depth if you wish. But we worked with 5 youth serving organizations, and we connected these organizations to park implementing agencies, including Washington County on the call with us this evening. And young people themselves were researchers with us. They generated information and analyzed data on how to support the youth outdoors connection. And so they described the topic of safety as a barrier to park visitation. And they emphasized a lot of ideas to answer questions around those things we talked about: meanings, feelings, and history connected with safety. And so let's look at a few of those very briefly. In terms of safety meanings, our research found 9 dimensions of safety. So on that survey question, do you feel safe in the park? Even if someone says not completely safe, we don't really know what that means. But when we drilled down, we found that safety included concerns about animals, concerns about strangers, injury, police violence, gun violence, and also the unpredictability of nature. So for example, there was someone who talked about safety could even mean not having a lack of information. Somebody said we can't know if something is safe unless we get more information. And in this case, they were talking about ice fishing. So feeling unsafe in the park in a winter context could be potentially, we could talk about creating a more inclusive context just in a way of providing information. We also found that safety involves events and feelings. So one parent, we worked with youth and parents in this research, said the world feels unsafe right now because of strangers. Another parent talked about, my kids were targeted by police in the parks, and it is frightening. That safety was about worrying about police and youth interaction. And then it was also a matter of messaging. There was a feeling, I get the message that I don't fit in here, this feeling of not belonging. And then finally, I would say, if we look at a statistic where it says 1% of people had a negative experience, I found through our qualitative research that wanting to lift up the idea that community history shape experiences of safety, that a severe racist incident can affect an entire community for years, that parents, Hmong parents who we did one focus group in Hmong, talked about an incident where I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, where a hunter was murdered in Wisconsin. And this was something that they brought up in thinking about their own children's safety in parks here in the regional park system. One incident has an impact for generations. Another family member's incident will inform a wider community. One child told about a cousin who was no, I'm sorry, it wasn't a child. It was a teenager, a youth, talked about how his cousin was injured in a sledding accident. And as a result, he concluded that sledding was dangerous, that he would feel unsafe sledding in the parks. So just thinking about that, an incident of safety, that safety is not just an individual experience, but a community experience. So that was a very quick tour through a lot of ideas. I'm happy to talk a lot more about them, either now, which is at the end of the day, or in another context. But just to conclude, if we can go to the last slide, whether we have the energy to do it right now, or we just want to take this away with us for the evening, is just asking the question, how can hearing perspectives as park professionals, as policymakers, how can hearing professionals on meanings, feelings, and history help us to create a more welcoming regional park system? Thank you so much for your attention. I'm invite any comments, advice, feedback, or questions.
All right, thank you. I just have one thing I want to toss out before I forget it. That's not, I'm sure not something we have information on now, but possibly something to look at for future research. I know back, I think it was 2015, we had the study of park non-visitors and barriers to visitation, and a huge portion of the responses we got on that was about safety. And here we're interviewing people who are visitors about safety. And while there are differences between white and BIPOC visitors, they're actually not huge. Like, they're statistically significant, but they're still, especially in those moderately or largely unsafe categories, 1%, less than 1%. But of course, obviously, there's a large chunk of people who aren't visiting that don't show up in a visitor study. So I'm curious about the difference between kind of perceptions and experiences, meaning of the people that have never been to a park, if they went, would their experience be different than their perception? And of the people who did go to a park and had a negative experience or in safety, is that negative experience enough to make them not come again? Or is it a smaller detraction, but they're still going to be a visitor? Like, I know there's things that I do personally where I may understand that it's not super safe, but I still do it. And there's other things where I determine that that safety is an actual barrier. And where is that line? How much is the safety concern actually impacting visitorship? And how much is it impacting quality of experience, but not changing whether they're a visitor? And do we have a way to find that out?
So, Chair Russo, thank you for that question. I really appreciate it. And I'm pleased to say that the Youth and Parks study actually intentionally connected with youth serving organizations whose youth and parents did not have extensive outdoor experience. And so some of them, the in-park experience that we did was their first visit to the regional park. So we actually were able to collect quite a bit of data for those non-visitors, as you were mentioning. But at the same time, we were able to connect with youth and parents who had extensive park experience. And so the report does compare those as a way of thinking about how to reduce safety as a barrier. And you're actually right on that there's a couple of important implications for us as professionals. First of all, that parents did say that even though they were concerned about safety with experiences in the park, they were able to feel like they could navigate that risk with more security. But the other important finding is that that providing information and also providing staff who had cultural and linguistic competency to share that information lowered those feelings of insecurity and of fear. Those, eliminated many of those barriers around different kinds of feelings of being unsafe. So you make a great observation. The other kind of tantalizing tidbit I'll hang out there is that we're doing the 2021 visitor study. We're collecting a lot of open-ended comments that we hope will also give us further information about that later question you asked about how much is does park visitation reduce people kind of staying away because of safety fears?
Okay, interesting. Does anyone else have thoughts already on this? And certainly we're going along on time, so if you would prefer to carry them over to next month, that's fine too. But does anyone have things you'd want to share this month?
I just had a quick question for Darcy. This is really an interesting topic, but I'm curious whether you saw a difference between people identifying as female versus people identifying as male. Because I know when I talk to people in Washington County about going to parks, I know some women who are afraid to go alone. They're afraid of being mugged, raped, or otherwise physically impacted. And I don't know if you heard anything like that.
Yeah, Cicely, that's a great point. There is a gender dimension to feelings of safety in the park. I didn't bring those data here today because I wanted to kind of focus on one topic to work quickly. And we saw that in the 2016 visitor study, and we also saw it in, not as much youth didn't talk about it, but parents talked about it in terms of fearing for their daughter's safety in a way that was different than fearing for their son's safety. So I think you're right on about that. And again, looking at those who are most impacted by this barrier, it's worth asking the question of like, what would create a context that would make women feel safe in a welcoming park system?
Okay, anyone else? All right. Does anyone have anything that you want to throw out there as something to think about for bringing this back next month? Or are we kind of moving to something else? Or that may also be a thing for feedback to send by email if you think about things too. As we determine next month's agenda. Okay, well, I think hearing no more on that, thank you, Darcy. And we'll move forward to the reports part of our meeting. Chair reports. I don't think I have anything right now. So other commissioner reports? Hearing none. Staff.
I have 4 very short reports, Chair. My first one is I want to introduce Chi Yang. He is a new hire in the Parks unit. We're really excited about Chi being here. He comes to us from the City of St. Paul's Park Department, where he was a landscape architect and designer. Chi joined us, I think this is his 3rd week, and we're just really excited to have him. So he'll be working on master plan review as well as comprehensive plans and other duties as assigned, as they say. So the next thing is disappointing news, and that's just that the September 17th Bedote tour has been canceled due to the persistent continuation of the pandemic and the Delta variant. We are following the Department of Health's lead, and as well as the governor, our chair, and so that will be rescheduled for spring of 2022. I think this will be our 4th rescheduling. Please stay tuned, and thank you for your patience. Similarly, I just wanted to probably confirm what you already know. Because of the continued pandemic, we will not be holding any fall tours. I know that's disappointing to commissioners and staff. And I wanted to thank our park agencies because I did put a lot of feelers out, and everyone was like, yeah, we want to have a park tour. So there will be better times ahead is my great hope. And then the last thing is I'll send a reminder, but one of the things that Commissioner Moeller recommended was this documentary called Stories I Didn't Know. And I sent out a link to that documentary, and we will be hosting a discussion on that, as well as we'll be streaming it ahead of time. So on Thursday, September 30th, and I'll get all this information I sent out on August 5th after our last meeting. I'll send it out tomorrow to you. But on Thursday, September 30th from 1:45 to 2:45, we'll be streaming the documentary Stories I Didn't Know. We'll take a short 15-minute break, and then there will be a facilitated discussion between 3 and 4 on that Thursday, September 30th. The people from the video, Rita Davern, and then I'm sorry, I can't remember, but I know it's Ramona and Ruben Sita, and it's a hyphenated name. I'll get that in the email. They will all be on hand for the discussion. So it's just going to be a short opportunity to think a little bit about the previous inhabitants of the land where a lot of our parks and trails are located today. So very thought-provoking, and I again appreciate Commissioner Moeller suggesting it. That information will go out soon. That's all I have for reports.
Right, sounds good. Thank you. And our liaison is not here today, so that should wrap us up. And I believe we're ready to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.